What makes a story truly unforgettable? Is it a shocking twist? A larger-than-life hero? Or an epic adventure? Maybe. But I think the stories that truly capture our hearts, the ones that stay with us long after the last page is turned or the credits roll, are the ones that connect with us on a human level. They're about ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances. Or sometimes, just ordinary people navigating the quiet, profound moments of everyday life. Today, I want to tell you one such story. It's not about kings or dragons, but about a small act of kindness that rippled through a community in a way no one could have ever predicted. It all started in a bustling, noisy city, on a particularly gray and drizzly Tuesday, the kind of day where everyone seems to be in a rush, heads down, avoiding eye contact, just trying to get from one dry place to another. Our story centers on an old man named Arthur. Arthur was a retired watchmaker, a man whose life had been dedicated to the intricate dance of gears and springs. Now, his days were much quieter. He lived alone in a small apartment overlooking a busy street, and his main companion was time itself, something he once mastered but now simply watched pass by. Every afternoon, rain or shine, Arthur would take a walk to the local park. It was his ritual. On this specific gray Tuesday, as he shuffled along the wet pavement, he noticed something. Tucked away under a park bench, trying to stay out of the rain, was a scruffy, shivering dog. It was a mutt of no particular breed, with matted fur and the saddest eyes Arthur had ever seen. Most people hurried past, barely giving the animal a second glance, but Arthur stopped. He was an old man, and his heart had seen its share of sorrow. He couldn't just walk away. He approached slowly, not wanting to frighten the creature. He sat on the far end of the wet bench and just stayed there for a moment. He didn't have any food. He didn't have a leash. All he had was time. After a few minutes, he started to talk to the dog in a low, gentle voice. He told it about his day, about the leaky faucet in his kitchen, about a memory of his late wife, Eleanor, who had always wanted a dog. The dog just watched him, its shivering slowly subsiding. Cautiously, it crept out from under the bench and rested its head on Arthur's worn-out shoe. "Ain't that small? Simple?" History a bond was formed. Arthur knew he couldn't leave the dog there, so, using his old scarf as a makeshift leash, he coaxed his new friend to follow him home. He named him Ticker, a nod to his old profession. The first few days were a challenge. Ticker was scared of everything. Loud noises, sudden movements, even the creak of the floorboards. But Arthur was patient. He shared his small meals with Ticker, created a warm bed out of old blankets, and continued his one-sided conversations, filling the quiet apartment with the sound of his voice. Slowly but surely, Ticker began to change. The fear in his eyes was replaced by a look of trust, then affection. His tail, which had been tucked between his legs, started to give tentative little wags. Soon, it was wagging all the time. But the most remarkable change wasn't in the dog. It was in Arthur. The quiet, solitary old man started to smile more. His daily walks were no longer lonely rituals. They were adventures with his best friend. Ticker would chase squirrels, greet other dogs, and nudge Arthur's hand for a pat, pulling him back into the present moment. Their little companionship started to have an effect on the neighborhood. People who had never noticed Arthur before now stopped to say hello and pet Ticker. A young girl who lived down the hall, usually glued to her phone, started asking if she could help walk Ticker. A gruff-looking man who ran the corner store, someone Arthur had only ever exchanged nods with, started saving leftover scraps for the dog. Ticker became a bridge, connecting Arthur to the community around him in a way he hadn't been connected in years. One day, a woman from a local animal rescue group saw Arthur and Ticker in the park. She recognized Ticker as the dog who had run away from a shelter months ago, a dog they had all but given up on. He had been deemed unadoptable because he was so fearful and withdrawn. Seeing him now, happy, healthy, and full of life, she was stunned. She approached Arthur, and he told her their story. The woman was so moved that she asked if she could share it on the shelter's social media page. Arthur, a man who didn't even own a computer, agreed. The story, accompanied by a picture of the smiling old man and his scruffy companion, went viral. It wasn't just a story about a man rescuing a dog. It was a story about a dog rescuing a man. It was a story about how a simple act of stopping, of offering a little bit of time and kindness, could transform two lives. The response was overwhelming. The shelter received a flood of donations. More importantly, people were inspired. The story of Arthur and Ticker reminded them that there were so many unadoptable souls, both human and animal, just waiting for a second chance. The shelter saw a massive spike in adoptions, especially for older animals and those with behavioral issues. People weren't just looking for a perfect pet anymore. They were looking for a friend to save, and in doing so, to save a part of themselves. A local news station picked up the story, and soon, Arthur and Ticker were minor celebrities in their city. But through it all, Arthur remained the same humble watchmaker. For him, the fame and attention were secondary. What mattered was the warm weight of Ticker sleeping at the foot of his bed each night. What mattered was the wet nose nudging his hand in the morning. What mattered was that his quiet apartment was no longer quiet. It was filled with the sounds of life, of a happy dog, and of his own laughter. Arthur's story shows us that the most powerful narratives aren't always the loudest. Sometimes, they are whispers. They are the quiet acts of compassion that ripple outward, creating waves of change we could never foresee. It's the story of a lonely man who chose to see a creature in need, not an inconvenience. He didn't have much to offer in terms of material wealth, but he gave what he had in abundance: patience, kindness, and time. And in return, he got his life back. He found purpose, community, and unconditional love. This is the kind of story that captures our hearts. It reminds us of the profound connections that are possible when we just take a moment to look up, to see the world around us, and to open our hearts to the possibility of helping another being. It's not about grand gestures. It's about the small, everyday choices we make. The choice to stop. The choice to care. The choice to connect. So, the next time you see someone or something that looks a little lost, a little broken, a little unadoptable, maybe think of Arthur and Ticker. You might not be able to change the whole world, but you might just be able to change one world. And sometimes, that one world might just be your own. The most beautiful stories are the ones we choose to live. Thanks for listening to this story with me today. I hope it warmed your heart as much as it did mine. If you have a story about a small act of kindness that made a big difference, I'd love to read about it in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that matter. See you next time.